There's a woman that I know, and I absolutely adore her. I love her, and I respect her tremendously. And if you looked at her life about 10 years ago, looking from the outside in, it looked pretty typical. It actually looked pretty great. She had a husband who was her biggest supporter. She had 2 adorable boys, one of whom had special needs, but that really didn't deter her. In fact, it seemed to fuel her fire. She was out in the community. She was advocating hugely for him. They were creating change in their school district and helping them learn how to better educate people with autism. And she founded a nonprofit, something she knew nothing about, to bring more awareness and resources to other families in the community. She had lots of friends. She was just really active. I mean, it even looked pretty. She had a 2,600 square foot home, a 3-car garage, and even the quintessential golden retriever and a white picket fence. However, all of that changed one night when she received a phone call. It was from her husband's mistress. Turns out her marriage of 16 years was crashing down before her because her husband was cheating on her. And this brought her to her knees. She actually found herself sitting on her couch one evening, and while she wasn't creating a suicide plan or actually contemplating it, she truly felt like she didn't want to be there. And life would be so much easier if she didn't have to be. That if there really was a place called heaven, it sure sounded great right about now. This wasn't really an option though, because she had 2 kids that she had to care for. So her next thought was, maybe I could get in like some kind of horrific accident that would just put me in the hospital for 2 or 3 months. And then I wouldn't have to deal with any of this, and I wouldn't have to handle any of this pain because I can't. I just can't do it. And yet she woke up. And that might sound really desperate and really extreme, like it was just cheating. It happens to people all the time, but the thing is, it wasn't just about the affair. This woman was kind of looking forward at the rest of her life, and she'd been a stay-at-home mom for 9 years, pouring herself into autism and her children, so she had no job, which meant she had no income. And she was facing being a single mom of 2 boys, one of whom was autistic. And at that time, her other son came out as gay. And while this woman had no problem with that whatsoever, she has a huge, generous heart and is very loving, accepting of everybody, she knew that not everybody else was the same. And so she was thinking, like, I'm kind of a unique package. Here I am, 40, unemployed. I have a son with autism and a son that's gay. And I'm not sure that there's anybody out like looking for that as their dream woman. So she was thinking that she might be alone for the rest of her life. Also during all of this, she lost her home to foreclosure. So she found herself behaving really strangely during this time. In that year that all this was happening, she actually took her husband back 6 times. I mean, what causes someone to behave that way? Here's this confident woman changing her community, looks like she has it all together. Her husband cheats on her, and she desperately hangs on to him and takes him back 6 different times. Well, it turns out that this woman had no skills for handling uncomfortable things in life. And as she started looking back on her life, this was a huge pattern. She was 40 years old, and she learned that in her entire life, she had never been able to deal with discomfort. She could not stand when people were mad at her. She couldn't handle the thought of disappointing someone or people being upset with her, of getting a bad grade, of failing something, of making a mistake. And so what she became was a classic avoider. She was great at being a people pleaser, at being funny, at making people laugh and drawing attention to herself, sometimes even lying just to make it look like everything was okay because she was so afraid and felt like she wasn't capable of handling discomfort. So here she is behaving really desperately, and her marriage ended up in divorce anyways. Now she's sitting on her couch, and despite all of her best attempts to avoid discomfort, it has landed squarely in her lap. Turns out though, that as she's finding this about herself, she's also discovering that she's not alone. She's not unique. She's looking around and she's noticing that tons of her friends, tons of adults, tons of coworkers, people in her community, people who look like they have it all together, who look successful, who look happy, none of them really have these skills for handling the uncomfortable either. They all are great avoiders, whether it be shopping, drinking, gambling, socializing, procrastinating, gossiping, all kinds of ways to avoid, but nobody seemed to be able to take action. And it became pretty clear to her that she was going to have to learn how to handle discomfort because there it was square in her lap. So she started looking into it. She started researching, how do you get comfortable with things that are uncomfortable? And she started looking at people that you would consider inspirational and successful. You know, people like Richard Branson and Oprah, Brene Brown, a gentleman by the name of Eric Wilheimer. He was, I believe, the first man to climb Mount Everest, and he's blind. And, you know, were they somehow like magically blessed people who never had anything uncomfortable happen, never had to experience rejection or death or lived without fear? And it turns out that no, you know, discomfort is unavoidable. It is just part of life, and you can never outrun it. So if you ask these people, it's not that they're immune from uncomfortable situations or fear, it's that it doesn't stop them. They step into discomfort. They almost embrace discomfort, and in doing so, they develop a better tolerance for discomfort. So this woman decided that she was going to do that very thing and discover, what steps do you actually take to be comfortable with the uncomfortable? Because it appears that those are the things you need to have success and wholehearted living and fulfillment and happiness. And, you know, that's what everybody claims that they want. I'm really happy to report that she figured it out. And in case you haven't figured it out, the person that I'm talking about is me. And despite my marriage ending in divorce, despite being cheated on, despite being left a single mom with 2 children, I ultimately found love and happiness. And even in that space, that person was diagnosed with cancer. And I still am able to navigate discomfort. I'm also happy to report it's a skill that anybody can learn. You know, a big, huge part of this has to do with mindset and positivity and self-love. That woman I talked about in the beginning who I admired and loved, that wasn't always the case. Clearly, if I took someone back 6 times, I wasn't really having a lot of confidence and self-love. It's something that I developed. I developed my resiliency muscle. And again, a lot of that has to do with mindset and thinking positive thoughts and having a belief and self-love. But the thing is that, you know, those aren't necessarily new ideas. They're great ideas, and we've heard some great talks on them. But TED Talks are great ideas, new ideas worth spreading. And I wholeheartedly believe that this is an idea worth spreading. Getting comfortable with the uncomfortable is a key to finding joy. Joy through resiliency. I would be honored to speak on the TED stage and help people learn how to do just that.